I've been to Japan for the semis. Judging alongside me is Leroy and David. So there's a bit of a crowd. Please keep the cheers to a minimum. Yeah, okay, noted. Please silence your phones, leave the hall, or leave it out of speeches. And yeah, without further ado, I'd like to invite Prime Minister.
I promised my speech would sound a bit less robotic than me operating the computer. But before I move on into the two areas that I want to prove, one, how this calibrates Malaysia's education system more accurately to its needs, and secondly, how we maximize economic opportunities for Malaysia, I want to first talk about what exactly this moving towards the east instead of west means. I think there are certain things that we can do. I think the first thing is that in terms of the soft narratives regarding Malaysia education, we want to move one that encourages more cultural and educational exchanges with Asian countries as opposed to Western countries. So for example, if you just take a look around Sunway University, you see that it partners itself a lot with Monash University or Cambridge University, for instance. We're happy to do things like support education exchanges with Peking University from China, for instance, or the Japanese universities, for example. Those are things that we necessarily support. But we also support other things. We also support a full reform of the educational system. For example, most students in Malaysia also end up taking the A-levels as an entrance exam to universities. We want to scrap those. We want to introduce more Asian-centric exams, such as the one that China uses, whatever it's called. Okay, we're also happy to say languages is a thing that we accept too. So we are happy to say educational systems, or at least people have a choice of different kind of languages or the degrees they want to have. So you can opt for a Bahasa degree, for instance, as opposed to one that's only done in English. So those are things we necessarily support. That's a general idea of what this policy means. Now that we got that clear, how does this calibrate Malaysia education system more accurately to its needs? We got two reasons for this. The first is that a lot of times, if you take a look at the education system and what the American/British system prioritizes, those are just very soft skills that very soft things that Malaysia just doesn't need. We're talking about liberal arts programs, for example, or a lot of things that are more academic based, like sociology, for instance. Those are things that UK as well as America tend to specialize in, but those are things that we just generally don't need in Malaysia. And the reason for this is because Malaysia as well as these Western countries are at distinct and different points of which the economy is developed. We say that probably they need harder skills, things like engineering, for instance, things like technical expertise, for example. And these are things that Asian countries like Japan, like Korea are specializing in. So we want to move towards that so that we are able to gain a skill base that is more accurate and more more closely approximate the economic needs of our country. That's the first reason. Before that, opening up to you. Closing.
So why can't you get all this technical expertise from the country that did revolutionize the entire IT system? I don't think this debate is about learning IT or learning in the West or learning in the East.
No. So those are not mutually exclusive. But the point is that the idea is that the Western education system has moved past the point of what Malaysia currently needs, right? So it's moving into things like, I don't know, sharing economies and technical aspects of those things. But they're not more primary skills that Malaysia should focus on. All we're saying is that those are things that China, Korea, and Japan are focusing on. So it's just better that we closely approximate to them. Note here that the education system, just because we move eastward, is not mutually exclusive. Probably people who want to study sociology can still go to the Western system. But the idea is that we want to move the education system such that it's more closely approximating to the Eastern system, just because it makes sense. Second argument, therefore, second point to this argument is that a lot of times there's a stifling of local educational policies as a result of the Western elite stranglehold over policy making regarding education. There's a lot of times, if you take a look at educational ministers or education policy makers within Malaysia, a lot of them come from Western universities. So they have a very liberal bias, or they have a very Western worldview of what our education system should be. But that's not necessarily correct, or that's not necessarily what Malaysia generally needs. We say that it's better calibrated if we're able to groom our own local policies. We're talking about, for example, having a degree program in Bahasa, for example, because it makes sense that you want a closer relationship to a much geographical proximate Indonesia, and you want to do things like business there. Those things make sense, and this kind of development of educational policies will stem from removing the kind of Western bias that we have in status quo. So it's moving away from the Western bias, and the narrative of moving away from that is probably a good thing. So that's how we calibrate the educational system. Second point, therefore, maximizing of economic opportunities. I want to first provide the context in which the economic world currently exists. The first point is this: the US is currently pivoting away from Asia in terms of economic opportunities. We see it like moving towards more protectionism as well. But on the contrast, we see high levels of foreign investments coming from Asian countries into Malaysia. We're talking about the One Belt, One Road initiative from China, for instance. All we're saying that at this point in time, that it makes sense for us to more closely approximate our educational system to that of China because of the high levels of opportunities there. But more importantly, we think it's important that we do this for 3 reasons. One, that it provides us an entry point into Eastern educational system, things like China, and those things make sense. If you agree that they are more geographical proximate and that's non-contentious, then it makes sense that we try to strengthen the business ties there because the barriers of entry into business in those countries are probably significantly lower than those of like Europe or like European or Western countries. But more importantly, right, I think the point here I want to note is to make sure that we understand that moving an educational system does not mean we suspend trade with like Eastern countries or Western countries. Like the trade still goes on. The real question is like, it's really about the culture of business and what kind of business culture we want to more closely move towards. We say it makes sense that we move towards these Eastern countries because of how close they are. Cultural proximity is also a thing here, right? So like for example, Malaysia more closely approximates countries like Indonesia or Philippines because of its like kind of like Asian culture or Asian values. Those things are important in terms of like the business kind of relationships that you want to make. A lot of times business is not just about a transaction between like two people, it's also about a relationship that you want to build over time. We say that like the kind of like, if we have like more similar educational system, it also means that people are better able to communicate with each other. We say the grooming of these relationships are probably a good thing for Malaysia. But thirdly, the ideas of technical know-how. Note here that a lot of like infrastructure projects are now being overtaken by China, for example, right? This is important. It means that we need to like learn more intimately exactly the kind of technology that China uses as opposed to the technology that Europe or like Western countries use. Because those kinds of like technology are not being applied here. So it only makes sense that we like learn like the kind of engineering or software skills from China because they are the ones that are like have infrastructure that's operating in Malaysia. If we want Malaysia to sustain their own infrastructure, it makes sense that they learn intimately with the Chinese or the Japanese on the kinds of things they have. So at the end of the day, the idea is this, right? To the extent that like trade with US is waning and like the relationship and economic opportunities is like increasing with China, all we are saying is that we want to more closely approximate our education system so we can capitalize on that opportunity. Because we better calibrate the education system, because we maximize economic opportunities, we are very proud to propose.
Okay, thank you for your speech. Now to begin the opposition case, I'd like to invite the leader of opposition, Here.
speech is going to focus on two broad frames. First is about the economic and how are we able to get a lot more economic opportunities on our side. Second, about how we ensure the education system is a lot more robust. First, about economic opportunities. So the trust and probably the only point from opening opposition was that we need to use the West as counterweight. Two structural reasons why this is unlikely to be true. The first is that this actually ignores Ming Shen's argument about how the West is increasingly isolationist. We are talking about an isolationist America who's put so much tariffs on goods and services that needs to be imported anyway. So that is to say, a manufacturing-based Malaysia is unlikely to be able to penetrate and get any economic concessions and opportunities there. But the second thing to note here is that the West is actually not that powerful to start with. Just look at pre-Duterte and how his alignment with USA failed tragically, and him having to pivot to China at the end of the day. We suggest that insofar as opening to opposition's main claim and main concession is that China is going to be rising, I suggest that now having a first mover advantage to align yourself with China forms you goodwill to be actually at the heart of infrastructural projects. Because at the end of the day, we are talking about an increasingly dominant China who wants to expand out to the world. If we are the regional headquarters of Southeast Asia or China's proxy state in Malaysia, I suggest that is a benefit in and of itself, rather than we join a lot later when the West can't even provide a counterweight at all. Because now China is dominant and we have to accede to and acquiesce to their demands. No thanks. But the second thing to note here is that I suggest that the Chinese economy has so much to provide for you, and the only way to get in is through education. And here's why. Because businesses are oftentimes about relationships. And those relationships and those partnerships are not only formed magically, they are formed through who you go with to school, and these people end up to be your business partners. I suggest that that is the mechanism of which we ensure the penetration. But moreover, I suggest that most of the times people in Malaysia hardly understand the systems that we work in Malaysia or within Southeast Asia. How are these things and how does these things look like? These look like things like the Confucianist work ethic where people are very hardworking vis-a-vis the West. Or moreover, things like the political systems within Southeast Asia, where if you are educated within a construct of international history, understanding the struggles of Stalin and Hitler, I suggest that you are missing out a big part and big market knowledge that the education system should actually tell you. Why is China more important? For three structural reasons. No thanks. The first is that China actually has a damn big, huge consumer base that the West can't actually compete. And the part of the point here is that the context of a Malaysia, of a manufacturing base, needs to capture that consumer base that they are actually missing out of. The valuable relationship gives us the market advantage within those situations. But the second thing to note here is that we get a lot more infrastructure. Insofar as we are talking about a huge degree of Chinese investors coming in right now, like in Iskandar, like the One Belt One Road initiative, I suggest that the only way we can get more of these infrastructure is through getting those relationships and ensuring that we have a good alignment with China. The crucial part of this point is to say that the investments are important in the context of a Malaysia with poor infrastructure which are losing out on these important infrastructural tendencies. No thanks. The crucial point to note here is that I don't think we lose out on any of the opportunities the West gives us. Why is that the case? Because we think that precisely because of our alignment and the shift towards China, I'm going to flip that argument on them, we make the West more incentivized to engage us a lot more. Malaysia is placed in a strategic position that the West actually wants to capture. Oftentimes, all the kind of goods and services have to pass by the Malacca Strait, of which we think, now that the Americas and the West now knows that Malaysia is pivoting increasingly to China, they are a lot more incentivized to give us the benefits. Trump is likely to be less isolationist when it comes to Malaysia, and we are going to get the best of both worlds here. I suggest that the context of which we are dealing with is two things. One, an increasingly rising China, of which we want to get goodwill, get a first mover advantage in terms of the infrastructural projects we can get into. Second, making the West less isolationist, which increases the bargaining chip argument the opening opposition tries to run on us. So the end point of this argument is two things. One, in terms of hard economics, we definitely win. Second, in terms of getting West to be less isolationist, we definitely win. Closing.
How is all this not contradictory with the current Malaysian government's rejection of all your OBO plans and the fact that the Malaysian people equate Chinese control and Chinese project with Najib's corruption?
So, I mean, it's quite easy to say that China is rising and therefore we need to still want to partner China. Najib's corruption is not really an issue within this debate. I think you read the motion. Okay, second, about how we get a more robust educational system. So O's main point here is that we need to get diversity in the education system. Precisely. Now, currently, the Malaysian education system is too West dominated, or youth in general are too Western, in a way in which we oftentimes speak in English, right? Where we are unable to get the Western idea, like the ideas of like Confucianist values, which are important to break the hegemony of the West that has oftentimes been. So Malaysia is a colony of the West, and these structures of the education system has permeated up to today. We think we need to do something against these structures to ensure that the diversity of ideas that opening opposition talks about starts getting in here. But the second thing is that I suggest that on our side we teach a lot more soft skills that are relevant to Malaysians' economy. Insofar as we recognize that the education system is a platform where you gain employment and economic opportunities, I suggest that we do it a lot better. What does this mean? Malaysia is in a unique position where we trade a lot with Southeast Asia. Being able to know and speak and be like accredited in Bahasa Indonesia or Bahasa Melayu is something that's extremely important. On their side, where Western universities have the hegemony of defining what an educational success is, these like larger narratives of having cultures are unlikely to happen on their side for structural reasons. Like, I mean, for the ideas of new colonialism, like the West is unlikely to understand and take these and include all of these different educational narratives into account. So I suggest, in terms of ensuring that these people get economic opportunities, we do it a lot better as well. But the third thing is that I think we break the hegemony of Western universities, which improves the entire university system. And here's why. Because currently in status quo, there are only very little people who actually get into the elite Western universities. But insofar as Western universities are in control of the prestige of university education, what happens at the point where we have a counter narrative and we start having our own structure of universities is that we ensure and like start having a market of opportunities where we were structurally cut out of Malaysians to start with. Because in a system where we are competing with bloody white people, I don't think you can compete there. I suggest that we start our own rat race within China in a context which are more likely to succeed. So in terms of getting educational success, I think we are also a lot better. So the conclusion from opening government and why we take this debate is twofold. The first is that we capture the rising China's market, which is important. But second, we make Malaysians a lot more educated in a way that benefits them. For those reasons.
Thank you for that speech by the deputy leader of opposition. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I want to prove two things in my speech. First, I'll prove to you why we're better for the underprivileged in the Malaysian education system. Second, I'll prove to you why we can be better position Malaysia towards the future. First, on why we're better for the underprivileged in the Malaysian system. There's two groups of people I want to talk about. First, the economically underprivileged. Let's recognize some things about the Western system that they talked about. One, I think it's very individualistic. So what they prioritize is your ability to show that you are different from the rest, that you are creative, that your group project you score 10 upon 10 for creativity. Things like the ability to work in a team, right, and have a lot of group projects within your education system. Things like the humanities that opening opposition discussed, is an immense focus on the liberal arts. What's the problem here? These are the absolute worst ways to judge individuals who are economically disprivileged. So I taught in a school that's fairly economically disprivileged for a term this year, right? And the problem is these kids, they just, one, they are not used to having the freedom to think creatively. They're not used to being encouraged to go and explore your own ideals, because that's just not the kind of education system, the social economic background that they afford. That's not the kind of jobs that like their parents are used to, because they just aren't encouraged to think in these particular ways. Two, they lack the confidence to stand up for themselves up against your kid wearing a blazer in the class, right? And that's when we think they lose out in terms of things like group work. Their language ability is significantly worse because they just don't have the opportunities from young to expose themselves to this. What's the comparative here? I know what he's trying to say, right? He's trying to say we need to expose them now. The problem is, if I expose these kids now, they're not going to succeed within this education system, because they're going to have to compete with your kids who come from who come from the better schools, the equivalent of your Etons and the equivalent of your Harrows in Malaysia, right? These kids are always going to have a significant advantage within the education system that they want to have. The problem is then, insofar as the education system in any Asian society, unfortunately, is important because you can't get anywhere without a degree, because you want to be in school to have these qualifications, they increase the likelihood of these kids not being able to succeed within the education system. On the comparative, when we use an Eastern-based education system, I think the fact that it's more drill-based, the fact that it's more objective, gives these kids the opportunity to even succeed within the education system. CEO's argument might be good, but the reality is that it requires you to be in the education system first, and that's what we explicitly guarantee. Second, the idea of racial disprivilege. Recognize that this also ties into economic disprivilege, because the reality is that in Malaysia, I think a lot of like Indians and Chinese who are excluded from the Bumi Putra system just don't have that great economic background. The problem is that the Bumi Putra system already disprivileges these individuals, and I think you enhance this disprivilege when you use a Western education system. The problem is that at the point, you allow for so much subjectivity to enter the way in which students are assessed, and recognize that a lot of teaching jobs and assessing jobs also go to your Malays in the Malaysian society because of the Bumi Putra quotas. The problem is that you increase and you stack the kind of disprivileges that exist for your minority students, for your Chinese and Indian students within the education system. An objective system makes it far easier and far less discriminatory in terms of the kind of assessments that exist on our side of the house. Why is this important? And I'll take you in a bit. Because I think children need an opportunity, in principle, even if you don't want to talk about practicality. I think the fact is the education system calls on the teacher and calls on us as educators to benefit each and every single child and treat them as an end in itself. Insofar as we prove that this is beneficial for these disprivileged kids who exclusively can benefit within our systems, then I think this is where we want to progress. But second, because in a world in Malaysia where income inequality is high, we think that the problem is that, and often racial, I think the problem is if you want to keep this kind of unified social fabric, you need to maintain the ability for these kids to exist within the education system, believe that the education system is one that's not stacked against them, where they can participate. That's how we think we create a better future for Malaysia, by benefiting these underprivileged individuals. I'll take opening.
A system that relies on drills is also a system that relies on resources, it relies on time. That means that you're never going to get the kind of massive elevation of the standards of education or quality of education for underprivileged kids.
No, see, right? Your underprivileged kids lose on either side of the house. It's just an unfortunate reality of life. The difference is, I can teach the kid to drill. I can't teach the kid to have the kind of soft skills that are required to be confident to excel in your group work that started teaching from day one of birth. That's the difference, right? We allow these kids to catch up far faster than these guys. Second, why do you think in better position Malaysia for the future? So opening government wants to talk about what you learn, the content. I think that CO is probably right here in suggesting that content exists regardless of which education system you go for. So what we're going to tell you about is kind of soft skills and kind of ways of thought that we teach within an Eastern education system, which I think are exclusively better for the future of Malaysia. Let's recognize the context of Malaysia, right? I think the fact that Malaysia has a lot of natural resources that are untapped, the fact that there's a lot of space for investment to enter, suggests that Malaysia is not at a tertiary stage of economy, it's more at a primary, secondary stage where we're still focused more on things like manufacturing. The point here is that we think poetry is a luxury that Malaysia cannot afford. Here's why. We think that the extreme degrees of individuality and the belief in something bigger than yourself, in something that, in you being bigger, you having the potential to be bigger, and this kind of independent thought are not the best things to inculcate in order to encourage this economy to grow. What we need is to encourage a willingness for people to coalesce, to sacrifice for the greater good, to accept economic restructuring that's probably going to leave some degree of their skill not very relevant, that makes them need to go and take on different things to sit down in life and make some degree of sacrifices, right? To uproot themselves and go to that factory that's going to open along the North-South Express because that's what's better for them. These are all things that are absolutely vital to Malaysia's future. The problem is that the only way you do this is to encourage them to believe that they are part of a sum that is greater than the whole of its parts. Yeah, right? And how do we do this? We think that you do this via the nature of the education system. One, because presumably turning east in general across Eastern cultures is more towards the idea of Confucianist thought and a belief that you're in communitarian ideals, right? This manifests itself in terms of things like the civics education that we're likely to have within these Malaysian universities. Things, the choice of text that we ask students to read. This brings the way that children think in a way that it makes them more aligned to the needs of the Malaysian education system, willing to take on these manufacturing jobs, even if they're not that prestigious. This is important, right? Because we don't know, this whole China thing, whether we're going to work with China, that's speculative. But what's definite is that whether or not China helps us, we need to be able to take advantage of this as Malaysia and have a community that is willing to put in the hard work in order for Malaysia to succeed. This only happens when the ideals that we talk about exist. Opening up says it's bad because you're going to abuse Asian values. The point of everything I've told you, this is exactly what Malaysia needs. But more importantly, when you institutionalize these values within the education system, I think that's why it's harder for you to take advantage of them and run them in any way you please, as opening opposition says, is the problem. They want to talk about getting minorities to be more open to ideas. Look, I think the reality is, although they're discriminated against, it could be worse. It gets worse at the point that your Chinese and your Indian minorities want to take the fight to the Bumiputra, want to be vocal about the fact that they feel it's unfair. I think that's when you stir the tensions and make life a lot worse for these minority groups on that side of the house. Mr. Speaker, we think we are the best interest of Malaysians, especially the most underprivileged and vulnerable who need our help from the education system. We're very, very happy to do this.
Is that not here? Retracting consent. Yeah, I'm retracting consent, sorry.